Ah, Halloween. I love Halloween. I get to wear a costume, eat lots of candy, and I get to feel obligated to make some kind of special video for my channel. But I've already made my costume and eaten more than enough candy, so all that remains is a special video. And I've got something extra scary for you folks tonight. It's a perfectly ordinary episode review, but with a different background. If this is going to be a Halloween special, then it's only logical that I review the obviously Halloween-inspired episode, Bats. Why? What episode were you thinking of? Bats was a bit of a controversial episode in the reviewing community, although these days saying that is like saying that the episode had ponies in it. And I'm someone who has seen both sides of the controversy, having hated the episode the first time I saw it, but after seeing it again have grown to really enjoy it. So let's get cracking on this super spooky, well, not that spooky, episode. Hey, did you hear? Applejack likes apples! This isn't exactly the most gripping opening the show has done, although I will admit that bit with changing the shape of the reflections in her eyes to apples is pretty clever. Apple bucking day quickly turns pear-shaped, however, when Applejack discovers that her crop had been destroyed by an infestation of vampire fruit bats. And these aren't like the cute, but also kinda dumb-looking fruit bats from Season 3. No, these bats are big, ugly, and nasty, and can completely devastate a good crop of apples. So Applejack calls in her friends to help. She explains that she needs help ridding the orchard of these pests. Naturally, animal-loving Fluttershy isn't exactly on board with this. Fluttershy makes the argument that if they give a small amount of the orchard to the bats, then not only will they have a place to stay and food to eat, but by consuming the apples and spitting out the seeds, the bats will also help the next generation of trees in the orchard grow faster and stronger. Natural selection, folks. That's how it works. Now, this debate between Applejack and Fluttershy has given rise to one of the most peculiar things I've witnessed in the reviewing community. This debate is dumb, says one reviewer. It's obvious that Applejack is in the right here. I agree that the debate is poorly balanced, adds a second reviewer, but it's Fluttershy who clearly makes the better argument. These two reviewers would then proceed to debate the issue, while both being absolutely adamant that it is a very one-sided issue and there is no room for any debate on it. So the issue is obviously less clear-cut than some might think, and I like that. Writing these kinds of debates in fiction is hard. Oftentimes when I see opposing viewpoints, it's really obvious which one is right, or at least which one the author agrees with, which always makes the story less believable, because you're left wondering why any of the characters even bother to give the other one the time of day when they are so clearly wrong. Of course, this doesn't mean that a well-written debate cannot have an answer that eventually wins out. After all, the moral of this episode does eventually side with Fluttershy, but the simple fact that I have seen quite a few debates in the community about which character had the better argument shows that there was some good thought put into writing this conflict. But enough about bronies and their bickering. How do Applejack and Fluttershy resolve this debate? Through song, of course. I must have said this at least a dozen times before, but the songs in Season 4 are fantastic. And this particular song might just be my favorite of the season. Its style is just completely different and unique to anything else in the show. While most songs in the show are upbeat and cheery, this one is dark and Tim Burton-y. That's a word, right? It's really interesting to listen to just the instrumental version of this song. It's such a fascinating and chaotic mix of a huge amount of different instruments. Add on to that some really amazing visuals and you've got a great song. So Applejack wins this musical debate and manages to pull the rest of the main six to her side. Sounds like pretty bad news for the bats, but luckily Twilight comes up with a compromise. She figures that she can use a spell to make the vampire bats stop trying to eat the apples and instead get their food elsewhere. But in order for this spell to work, Twilight will need to get all the bats to focus, which will require the use of Fluttershy's stare. Okay, hold up a bit. What is the deal with the stare anyway? It was introduced back in Season 1, but has never really been explained. All we know is that, for some reason, Fluttershy has the ability to basically hypnotize animals. But what are the mechanics behind it? Is it inherently magical, or is it just a really intense stare? And if it's magical, how? I mean, we know from Twilight's Kingdom that all ponies, even Earth ponies and Pegasi, have magic in them, but is it some kind of genetic abnormality that allows Fluttershy to use her magic in this way? Actually, I think I can answer that last question. I think Fluttershy's ability to use the stare stems from her personality. In the Journal of the Two Sisters, it is implied that Luna's, and I can only assume also Fluttershy's, ability to talk to animals comes from them having a really strong sense of empathy for other living things. And if strong personality traits can manifest themselves in various magical abilities like that, then I think I can pretty safely assume that Fluttershy's stare works in a similar way. But back to the episode at hand. Understandably, Fluttershy is pretty reluctant to use the stare on the bats, but eventually her friends talk her into it. So they round up the bats, perform the spell, and everything seems to go great. The bats couldn't be less interested in the apples. Fast forward to the next day, and we have a problem though. Yet another crop of apples is inexplicably ruined. They check on the bats, but nothing has changed. They still have no interest in eating the apples. The only thing that has changed is that Fluttershy seems to have gained an overnight infatuation with apples. But hey, who can blame her? She was around apples all of yesterday. Who wouldn't be a little bit hungry? To get to the bottom of this conundrum, the main six decide to camp out the orchard at night and see who, or what, is causing all this. And after a display of some super adorable cutie mark adorned spotlights, the ponies split up. After some searching, they stumble across something they never expected to find, a horrifying bat-pony hybrid that turns out to be Fluttershy? Dun dun dun! But wait a second, Fluttershy is a bat pony? How did that even happen? Well, Twilight offers the following explanation.
Okay, so this is me, these are the bats, and this is Fluttershy doing her stare. The spell was supposed to go right onto the bats like this. But somehow the spell must have backfired. It took the vampire fruit bat's desire to be vampire fruit bats and transferred that desire into Fluttershy.
Really, show? Really? You really expect me to buy that? Because I totally do. I've always been someone with a really flexible suspension of disbelief, and I've liked crazier things than this slide, but I don't just tolerate this explanation, I actually prefer it, and here's why. This explanation proposes a pretty solid answer to the questions I had earlier about the stare. The simple fact that this kind of magical mix-up can even happen shows that the stare is much more than a simple stare, and instead is definitely something magical. Furthermore, the fact that the bat's obsession with apples got beamed into Fluttershy implies a certain kind of mechanism for the stare. It seems to me that the stare functions through some kind of magical mind meld. It's easy to imagine Fluttershy and the bats locked in a Psychonauts-like mental battle, so that when Twilight's spell throws a wrench in the works, things get messed up. Come to think of it, this is literally the exact same plot as that Wallace and Gromit movie. All that aside, I really like the way Flutterbat looks. It's like Fluttershy, but creepier. Even down to things like how her cutie mark is now 3 bats instead of butterflies. It's a very nice piece of character design. And design is a key word here, because it's the main reason I like this episode so much. With everything from Flutterbat, to the song, to the way the orchard looks at night, to the multitude of animation gags, the entire episode just oozes aesthetic. And it's all just done so well that I can't help but be entertained every time I watch this episode. But let's get back to the story. Eventually, the ponies come up with an admittedly kind of contrived but still passable way of turning Fluttershy back to normal. Applejack learns a lesson about not just picking the easy, short-term solution to your problems, and Fluttershy learns a lesson about not just letting your friends press you into doing things you really don't want to do. A pretty solid moral. In fact, this is a good example of why I like the way MLP handles morals in general. MLP is always able to come up with unique and interesting ways of teaching lessons. They teach lessons that are applicable in the real world, but always throw in a neat magical hook to make it interesting. Sometimes it's time travel, sometimes it's being possessed by dark magic, sometimes it's cloning, and sometimes it's being turned into a vampire. It's always these catches that make the show's morals interesting, memorable, and effective. All in all, I really can't complain much about this episode. Sure, there are a few issues with the writing, like the joke with Rainbow Dash obsessing over cider, which stopped being funny about the 17th time she said it, but the overall look and feel of the episode, combined with a great song and great moral, just make the episode a highlight of the season for me. I give it a I spent $60 on a piece of fan art exclusive to this episode out of 10. Good job, Megan McCarthy. Huh? What? She didn't write this episode, but the credits Oh, that was a mistake. Wait, well, who did write it? Oh. Well, never mind then, this episode sucks.